Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth.
We come now in our ongoing series that we simply call Ism to this ism that has been horribly maligned over the decades. That ism is literalism. Literalism, Literalism, literalism. And literalism is looked upon by the broader world and even people in the church as somehow something overly simple and unsophisticated and something to be eschewed. You will hear typically folks using this kind of language. Well, sure, I believe the Bible, but I don't take it literally. Or we shouldn't take it literally. Or what's wrong with you? You're taking this literally. Well, what do we mean by literally? Well, one of the problems that we have with this word is that we equivocate. That is, there are two different meanings to this word that we tend to confuse one with the other. Literalism technically means to read or to understand something in the way in which it was intended. So there are in written language, and well as other forms of communication, but in written language there are different forms that have different rules for how they communicate. There are literary forms and literary structures that have rules governing them. We understand that there is such a thing as a metaphor. There is such a thing as a simile. There is synecdoche. There is all sorts of different methods by which we communicate. And even in our Bibles, we recognize that there are sections of the Bible that are intended to give us history. There are sections in the Bible that are intended to give us doctrine. There are sections in the Bible that are intended to give us poetry, and there's prophecy, and there's even different kinds of prophecy. So there's apocalyptic literature in the Bible that has its own set of rules. And so to read the scripture literally is to read in light of that reality. So that, for instance, according to this meaning of the term, if Jesus says, and in fact he does, that he is the door, we don't look for hinges and a doorknob on Jesus. Jesus is not intending to say, when he says, I am the door, that I am the thing that separates two rooms or inside from outside that swings on hinges. Instead, he is making an analogy, if you will. There are things that doors do that Jesus does. There's overlap. This is what analogies are. Analogies are perfectly legitimate literary means that seek to connect the things that are being compared at the appropriate places. If Jesus, in saying, I am the door, is saying I can be painted white or stained or made out of wood or metal, that's not what he's meaning. What he's saying is that he is a means of entrance into. He is the way. He is the pathway. Okay? So to take it literally is to take it as the metaphor that it is. Now, the other definition of literalism is the propensity to read things with what we call a wooden literalism, Wooden, which, by the way, is not literally wooden. That is, you can't saw it with a knife and you can't get splinters from it. What we mean by wooden literalism is that you don't take into account literary forms, but instead you read everything as if it is intended to communicate according to the rules of a historical narrative. So when you do look to Jesus for hinges and a doorknob, when he says, I am the door, then you are guilty of wooden literalism. You're failing to interpret literally, but you are using the wrong method of wooden literalism. Some of you may remember this. You might have to be pretty old in order to remember this, but I remember one of the favorite books. When I was in early grade school, the library at our school was literally in a janitor's closet. I mean, there probably weren't 250 books in this library. And so when you found one that you liked, you stuck with it and you took it out over and over again. And one of those books that we read over and over again was called The King. I can't remember, the King or the Queen, Who Reigned. The King Who Reigned, or the Queen Who Reigned. And it was a book that wasn't really a story, but it was about a boy who saw things literally. In fact, on the cover of the book, there was a monarch. Can't remember whether it was a boy or a girl, but there was a monarch with flying through the sky with raindrops coming off of them onto the ground. Right? This king or queen reigned, Rained. I remember another picture where the boy says that his mom had some friends over and they played bridge. And they weren't playing a card game called bridge. They were propping their feet up on the ottoman and their back up on the couch, and the cats were walking from the ottoman to the couch across them. By the way, that book was written by Fred Gwynne. Those of you who are really old remember that Fred Gwynne was first Herman Munster and second the judge in My Cousin Vinny. So that's wooden literalism, and it is bad, and we shouldn't do that. But there are precious few people who are guilty of that. Usually when someone says, I don't take it literally, what they really mean is, I don't believe it. We're supposed to believe it and understand it and follow the rules of interpretation and follow them well. I have suggested in the past that we ought, when tempted toward pride in our own spiritual maturity, take an honest look at how far we have to go, at the great gap between where we are and where we will be. When, on the other hand, we are assaulted by doubt, we ought to take an honest look at where we started and where we have come. The truth is that apart from Jesus, the most pious men to have ever walked the planet were immeasurably distant from moral perfection until the moment they died. And the most scandalous sinner who came to Christ at the last possible moment traversed that infinite distance immediately upon his death. All of this, and a fairly steady diet of science fiction, has led me to tweak this understanding a bit. We can make a difference. Suppose, if you will, that in a distant galaxy, a cajillion light years away, there is planet perfection. Not only is it a perfect planet for human habitation, it is a planet fit only for perfect human habitation. Now suppose you receive two things in the mail. First, citizenship papers to planet perfection. In fact, you've been adopted by the king of the planet, who just happens, by the way, to rule the whole universe. Also in the mail, however, you receive a ticket to get there. No, you won't be going warp speed on the Enterprise. Even that would take too long. No, you're going Teleportation Express. There is a time appointed for you to appear at the teleportation station. Once there, you'll step into the chamber and instantaneously be both transported and transformed, arriving at the same moment, perfect, on planet perfection. Of course you're excited. You're also grateful and eager to please your new father. But it will do you precious little good to board a plane, a train, or an automobile setting out for planet perfection. You could, theoretically, get a bit closer, but not so you would notice. What, though, could you do? Well, in one sense, every bit of travel you can muster won't make much of a difference in how far you have to go. Won't you rejoice in every step toward not the planet, but the portal? Won't you rejoice as you pack your bags? Wouldn't the journey to the station increase your excitement and anticipation? All you have to do is get to the station, and then in an instant you'll be a perfect prince on planet perfect. And every day you get closer to departure. But there's more. In the in-between, after you've received your paperwork, and before you step into the portal, every bit of becoming more what you will be, more of what your adoptive father is like already being there on the planet. You are becoming what you will be, living in light of the promise of planet perfect. I have so very far to go, but he already loves me as if I were all the way there. He has already made me his son. I'm packing my bags and learning the manners of the court. And he who is preparing a place for me is preparing me for that place.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.